I couldn't be more excited because today, the last of the 54-book series on the studies in violence, mimesis, and culture arrived. And I haven't been reading them in order. I've been trying to get them all on the cheap. But it is the greatest intellectual adventure I have ever taken. And my, oh my, it is so eye-opening. So, I read Le Bon years ago, and Elias Canetti rocked me to the core back when, just as the George Floyd riots were breaking out, interestingly enough. And that was the reason why I picked it up, because I had it on my shelf for a long time. Anyhow, it's interesting. If you're not familiar with Rene Girard and Mimetic Theory, this is probably going to mean nothing to you. But I discovered that on page 309 of Canetti's work, you can actually find the origin of what I have. This is the emblem, the victim mechanism, or the scapegoat. And it is right here. You can find it. I don't know Girard is one of the greatest saintly people I think ever to be a scholar on the planet. I mean, he's really one of these guys that is so wonderful to follow. But Canetti certainly was cited by Girard, but I don't know if he actually said that I found the victim mechanism and that scapegoat concept in Canetti. Anyhow, so Canetti wrote, when was Canetti wrote? In 1960. And in 1961, Girard publishes his first book. 72, second one, but it was really in 1978 when writing was Jean-Michel Oughourlian, The Things Hidden Since the Foundation of the World, that really Mimetic Theory was, fully outlined, and the structure was built in a way that from that point forward, anyone with the knack, anyone who bought into Mimetic Theory could then use what I call the mimetic spectacles to train then one's thinking and all of one's knowledge on their speciality. And so one of the first ones that I pursued was James Allison, who was a Catholic homosexual scholar who wrote some very interesting books. I think he's got the whole concept of homosexuality wrong, but anyhow, in 2007, funded in large part by Peter Thiel, our vice president's mentor, this 54-book series began. And Girard was alive. I think he died in 2014, but Girard was around to continue to contribute to it. He stayed out of politics until his final book, and I have not read that one yet. You can probably tell which ones I have read. You know what? I'm going to flip them over as I go through them, just for the fun of it, because I've read. That's why. Yeah, and it's interesting too, because 1951, Mimesis was written by Erich Auerbach, but I didn't read this one yet. He did not get the concept of the victim mechanism, and that's kind of the more important point of it all. There's a uncomfortable link to the Frankfurt School that I struggle with. And of course, the whole concept is nonviolence. And this was cool. I came across him for the first time. And this is the inspiration for Yoda. As a matter of fact, somewhere in here, I drew a little Yoda in the margins because it was so... you must unlearn what you've learned. There's the Yoda. Let's see. It's in here. Anyhow, he's flying I better find it. Or I'll just edit it out. That's what I'll do. See, this is the trouble with trying to go live. It's in here somewhere. Anyhow, doesn't he look like Yoda? Female feminist. Really looking forward to reading her. Not because she's a feminist, but rather she's a sane feminist. Anyhow, that'll get me in trouble, surely. I gotta stop doing that. If you want to find a place to start, the best place, of course, is I See Satan Fall Like Lightning. That's kind of his compendium, the summary of all his work. Okay, so I'm flipping these. This one was huge. Of course, Dostoyevsky, one of the first ones I read. Finished that one yesterday. That one, oh my gosh, this one actually made me feel sympathetic for Nietzsche, that maybe he wasn't just the Antichrist, but perhaps he was also the antidote. So that way Western civilization could stiffen its resolve and find God again. The work by the Mimeticist on the economy will blow you away. I do not know how. For example, I missed this essay, The Ambivalence of Scarcity. Such an important work, although very flawed, interestingly enough, and I'm looking forward to correcting him. Also, this is such an important book because it describes how to stop the Hatfield and McCoys. This may be the most important one, actually, now I think about it. Although this one is very important because in this one, he describes how we can basically trace all psychological disorders to how we handle our role models, our rivals, and our obstacles. It's really, this book will it eventually is going to completely turn psychotherapy on its head. So I should flip that one over. This one was one of the first, very, very important to understand about how bipolarity is still the dominant force. I've read about half this. I'm not going to flip that one over yet. This one's so very important when it comes. It was she who introduced me to this book that arrived yesterday, and I think her work on trauma is so important, so very, very important. So many people are going to be made happy, sane again. So very important to think about how this book is just so full of so many wonderful intellectual adventures. And then international politics, such an important aspect to mimetic theory. I've still not found what I'm looking for. I was hoping I was going to find it in this one, and I don't think he understands. I've read a couple books now on Islam, and this one knows that, I got to go back and read this one again. There's a lot of good in this one, but what most of them don't seem to want to recognize is that the main problem is not that Islam, the belligerents in the conflict between Israel and antagonist Islamic states. It's not because they are like each other and rivals. If that were the case, then Saudi Arabia and Dubai would be fighting with Israel. But instead, Israel is an obstacle to Iran. And it's primarily Iran, okay? Because Iran, of course, is the puppet master of the proxy regimes. And so everybody's trying to describe it through how Palestine and Israel are rivals because they're so dissimilar. And I'm like, no. You've got to understand that Muslim world is going insane. In large part, you've got to return, of course, back to the whole work that has been done by Bernard Lewis and the rest of the people in regards of the Middle East and the crisis, existential crisis of Islam when when the Ottoman Empire failed, and then they got on the wrong side of World War II and they joined up with the Nazis. And so when you look at who the real Nazis are today, it is without a doubt it's the Islamofascists, because they don't allow Jews in their country. They want to kill all the Jews. They have a final solution, and whereas there are tons of Arabs and Islamics and Druze and Maronites working in Jerusalem. Anyways, I'm off on a tangent. I was really hoping we could find a solution. Maybe I'm the one that needs to write that book. Alterity, this one is so very important to me because I do have a huge wardrobe of alterities. And so in some ways, I am the quintessential mimeticist because I have echolalia. And I have not only the capacity to do all the different voices in song, But, I've done the work where I have all of these people in my, these are all my different alter egos. These men that have been my role models, these thinkers from Chesterton and Lewis to the saints to, Father Schall and Father Spitzer. I mean, good grief, and that's before I even get to Knock and obviously the most important ones, Russell Kirk and Roger Scruton and George Gilder, and, the ability to think like an Austrian economist, but also to think like a Chicago schoolboy. I mean, who's doing that? And then also could come off the point. My real hero of the Austrians is the German, Wilhelm Roepke. And, I'd like to argue with Ludwig von Mises all day long. And here I am in Alabama. I'm about 4 hours from his institute at Auburn. And I just can't wait to go up there and argue with them boys, those anarcho-capitalists, those non-theistic, rationalist, anarcho-capitalists, and give them the truth from that fellow right there. Actually, at this point, we can pretty much all agree. And because Gilder has solved, as far as I'm concerned, the materialist question, and I think the Mimeticists have solved, particularly Dupuy, I don't even want to pronounce his name correctly, but this cat and Dumichel have these two books right here. Well, if you're in economics, read these two books and they will rock your world, baby. Okay, so haven't read this one again. Started reading a little of that one. Nope. This word is such an important word. And I know it's a mathematical term, but the concept of it is so very important. Very similar to self-fulfilling prophecies, but nice email book that'll explain some stuff to you. If you just want a really quick little, you can read this in half an hour or whatever. And that's even if you were a woodland kid. So the most recent piece of work that has brought, I think, probably more of my people to mimetic theory is because Cynthia Haven has written this introduction and done this compendium, and it was picked up by Acton Institute. So now that all my heroes at Acton, that means that, Hillsdale will be right there in tow if they're not already leading the charge here in America on mimetic theory. For me, of course, as I've said, and then the Cormac McCarthy, I've only read about half of this one, and I've not read any Cormac McCarthy, which is interesting because I've been such a dystopian enthusiast for so long. Nevertheless, I stopped reading that book so I can go and read some Cormac McCarthy. I don't know which one to start with, but anyway, here's my big experience with the adventures into mimetic theory. What is really exciting for me is that, of course, all of these books are written by, they're all polymaths, don't get me wrong, but these guys are writing interdisciplinary, no doubt, but for the most part, they're staying in their speciality. But what's important to understand is once you have the knack, once you have the capacity to put on the mimetic spectacles, so to speak, and then you can then look at any book and this is what they've done. They've gone through Shakespeare, they've gone through Proust, and they've done a lot of work. Because Proust is so very important when it comes to consciousness and motivation and, just ontology in general. But gee whiz, let's take a look at Dostoyevsky through mimetic spectacles. Well, it's been done. However, who's going to take a look at Walker Percy through mimetic spectacles? Well, if I sat down, I could start doing that right now. Of course, it's probably been 15 years since the year that I sat down and read everything Walker Percy ever wrote. I can occasionally go back through his stuff, but it's, who's going to go through, which Vugelin scholar is going to go put the mimetic spectacles on and do him? Or Or perhaps even more appropriately, how exciting will it be when someone picks up Phillip Rieff and puts mimetic spectacles on Rieff's three world concepts? There's just so much work that needs to be done on behalf of mimetic theory that we should be thankful in a way that it's taken so long. I can't remember which scholar did the best job of arguing why it's been so reluctantly received amongst the academy. And I think the latest answer that I thought was best is they said, well, everybody that's in any field has their own methodology. They have their own Weltanschauung way of looking at things. They've been doing it for a long time. To come in with something that seems to be so reductivist as mimetic theory, such a simplifying, but yet upheaval, it's unsettling. And, most people are like, yeah, okay, I'm doing fine without all of that. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's kind of fun, yeah. But when you understand, that's one of the greatest things about mimetic theory is that there's this whole concept of the veiling, how so much of what we do is veiled from us. And so the idea of the id is really, really exciting. And what was it that I was reading just recently? I can't remember who, because most of these guys are French, but someone was actually explaining to me why it was that Sartre had the answer for how it is, the age-old question that Voegelin and Robert Musil, of the idea of the second reality to which we can fall prey, that happened the world's deaths. All right, well, back to form here. The idea of, I'm a big Karl Krauss guy, big Robert Musil fan. Anyways, I've been talking here for 18 minutes. I wanted this to be a 5-minute video. I probably should just start over. Nevertheless, you should start learning about mimetic theory. I will post the best video I've seen on it so far, introductory video, below on this video's information slide there. So anyhow, those of you who know who you're being talked to, I hope you enjoyed it. Talk to you soon.